There I was in New York, staring at my computer screen at a job offer that might have made most people happy. To anyone looking in, it might have appeared as though I had made it. I was being offered the role of a personal banker for a steady income, health benefits, and a stock option. It was more money than I'd seen in years. I'd been freelancing, working random gigs like press conferences and film screenings featuring stars like Sex and the City's Kim Cattrall. Now, these were some pretty cool gigs, but I was making on average about $150 a month, and that was on a good month, which meant I was living at home, unable to help my mother. I kept applying and applying for positions across the board, from telling stories for media companies all the way to journalism, and I kept getting rejected. Fortunately, though, I had the support of my family and friends like Elizabeth, Jasmine, Stephanie, and Patricia. It was Patricia precisely who referred me for the banker role for which I was now looking at an offer. But as I stared at this offer, a dilemma brewed within me. Do I accept or do I decline? If I accept, I am a sellout. I've done the very thing I've advised others not to do. I have taken a job for the sake of having a job. I have given up on my dreams. Because see, ever since I was a little girl, all I ever wanted to do was tell stories. I would go to the cafeteria in the second grade with a book in hand. I was always reading or trying to emulate what I was reading by writing about it or writing my own stories. My mother would wrap my sandwiches for lunch in aluminum foil, and I'd take that aluminum foil apart and mold it into a microphone. I'd then go outside into the playground, gather a group of friends, and tell them stories. I learned at a really young age that when I entered the world of storytelling, I could escape the limitations of my own reality. But as I stared at this offer, those limitations rose once more to the forefront. Because if I declined, what in the world made me so entitled? What in the world gave me the right? As a little girl, I'd watched my mother dig through the couches of her Bronx apartment in an attempt to compile enough change to buy my sisters and me dinner. My mother fed us soup for breakfast for 1 week straight because it was all she could afford. My mother put aside her ambitions and her dreams for the betterment of our family. She went from being a hairdresser in the Bronx to somehow morphing into an MTA bus driver for the city. And so if my mother could do these things for the family, then why couldn't I? I crossed my fingers, hoping that some magical offer in the field would give, and I clicked accept. I was hired to be a personal banker on the condition that I passed some licensing exams, and I had gotten so good at failing that I failed those too. I almost got fired, if not for the fact that I appealed to my boss, Mark, by basically reporting on myself. I told them, hey, here's what I can bring to the table, I'm worth a shot. And so I began my role as a personal banker, first in Yonkers, New York, and then within several months I was transferred over to a branch in the Bronx. Sometimes I was behind the teller window, which is pretty ironic given the fact that I suck at math. And other times I was on the floor opening and closing accounts for our clients. I met on average on a weekly basis something like over 100 people, so it became really, really hard to grasp who was who, if not for the fact that I remembered their stories. I met some interesting characters, let me tell you. Like this gentleman who assured me, based solely on my coffee making skills, for he knew of my limitations in the kitchen, that I was sure to get married one day. Don't give up on love, he said, it's out there somewhere. Or this woman in her 70s who was on the line to conduct a teller transaction, all the while flaunting her fabulous attire. She said some things which I will not repeat right now, but let's just say she made the crowd pretty uncomfortable. And so I called her over to my desk, and there she moved her shirt aside and showed me her fabulous red Macy's bra. And she said to me, darling, it does not matter how old I am determined to live a happy life. Now, it wasn't all fun and games and happy stories. I came face to face with grief quite often. I learned of husbands losing wives and wives losing husbands. I met a woman who had just lost her son in Mexico when he went on vacation and drowned in a river. And as she sat before me in this stale, cold, impersonable environment, the only thing that I could think to do to comfort her was hand her a glass of water and simply listen. There were moments like that, and there were moments that were a bit more cheerful. Sometimes I was in the break room on my own, pacing back and forth, wondering, what in the world am I doing here? But then there were characters that come into the branch and kind of made me forget myself and pay attention to them. Like this woman who walked in one time, red frazzled hair, sweat dripping down her face, in a rush because she had to use the restroom. And I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, she looks just like Madame Medusa from Disney's The Rescuers. And I promise you, all I wanted to do was go home and describe her in a story. Because see, the thing was that even though I was making steady money and I was finally able to help out at home, this dream of mine to tell stories, it was still well and alive. And so I kept applying and applying to positions across the board, and I kept getting rejected and rejected. And it was like riding a roller coaster of highs and lows, and this might work out and then rejection, and this might be it and then rejection. And it was in one of those lows, I remember it was the end of December, and there's something about that time of year that makes one reflect, that I walked up to my mother and I said, Mommy, I can't do this anymore. I've given banking everything I have nothing left to give. I'm afraid that if I stay here for the stability that the money offers, I will surrender to a life that is not my own. And so with my mother's advice and support, I picked up the application process once more. I quit being a banker and applied to positions again across the board, but this time outside of New York. Now what I discovered is that my talent for getting rejected was not limited to New York. No, see, I got so good at being rejected, I was not getting rejected from positions in LA, Dallas, Miami, and even middle of nowhere, Jacksonville, Florida. And so again, I was on that roller coaster of ups and downs. And right as I hit a new low, in which I contemplated giving up, which happened every once in a while for nothing because I don't know how to give up. It was right there, as I almost gave up, that the desert sun called me and offered me the role of social reporter. So now let me tell you something. Nothing about the realization of this dream felt real to me. I was waiting for someone to come in and just take the rug from underneath me or tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, cool dream, now wake up. It felt surreal when I got on that plane in New York City, and it felt even more so when I landed here at PSP. It felt surreal when I got up to Iowa to cover my first fire, and then several days later, when I showed up to Banning at an evacuation site. I walked into this environment, again, a stale, cold, impersonable environment where people were sad, confused at the possibility of returning back to Idlewild and not having a home. And as I walked the path, I noticed a woman sitting beside her son in this environment filled with cots and a TV in the backdrop that wasn't even working. And as I approached her, she opened up to me and she started to cry because she feared she'd go back to no home. And as I looked at her, the only thing that I could think to do to comfort her was simply listen. And when I hugged her, as I walked out of there, the only thing I wanted to do was go back and describe her in a story. I wanted so badly to write about her. And that night, that's precisely what I did.